At 4,411 meters above sea level, there's an airport in western China where the air holds roughly 40% less oxygen than at sea level. Pilots need extra runway just to generate enough lift to take off, and passengers stepping off the plane sometimes need a minute just to catch their breath. This isn't a research outpost. It's a fully operating commercial airport, Daocheng Yading, the highest in the world, built on a plateau where, geologically speaking, an airport should never have existed. Airports are supposed to need flat land, stable ground, and predictable weather. Mountains offer none of that, and yet a handful of engineers around the world keep building runways on top of them anyway. Here's how you actually pull that off. Reading the mountain before you touch it. Before a single excavator shows up, survey teams spend months just trying to understand what they're dealing with. Drone mapping, geological sampling, satellite data, studying rock layers, fault lines, snowfall patterns, and drainage paths. They need to know exactly which parts of a summit can support the weight of a loaded aircraft and which parts will collapse the moment you put pressure on them. This phase looks boring from the outside. Nobody's operating heavy machinery yet, but it's arguably the single most important stage of the whole project. Get the geology wrong here, and every runway built on top of that mistake is unsafe from day one. Engineers use this data to mark out where the runway will actually sit, where retaining walls need to go, and, critically, how much of the mountaintop has to be cut away versus how much needs to be filled in to create something flat enough to land a plane on. Turning a summit into a shelf. Then the real fight starts. Controlled blasting breaks apart sections of solid rock. Excavators clear the debris. Dump trucks haul material to low points that need filling. Bulldozers spread it in layers, and compactors crush each layer down into something dense enough to actually hold weight. None of this is random earth moving. It's closer to surgery than construction. Remove too much rock from one side of a slope and you can destabilize the whole hillside. Undercompact a fill section, and the runway built on top of it can sink, crack, or warp years later. So the process repeats constantly. Cut, fill, compact, survey, check, adjust. Over months, jagged ridgelines slowly turn into terraces. Cliff faces become reinforced slopes. And for the first time, something resembling a flat plateau starts appearing where there was only a peak before. Fighting gravity permanently. Once you flattened a summit, gravity doesn't just accept that and move on. Everything on a mountain wants to slide downhill eventually. Soil, meltwater, loose rock, and, without serious intervention, the artificial platform itself. This is where massive retaining structures come in. Not garden-variety walls, but reinforced concrete systems anchored directly into bedrock, with steel cages and rock anchors drilled deep into the mountain to lock the whole platform in place. Drainage pipes are built directly behind these walls, specifically to relieve water pressure that would otherwise build up and eventually blow the structure outward. Exposed rock faces nearby get covered in steel mesh and sprayed concrete just to stop rockfall onto the runway below. None of it is visible to a passenger walking through the terminal later, but without it, there's no runway to walk toward in the first place. A runway that has to work harder. At altitude, engines produce less thrust and wings generate less lift, which means aircraft need meaningfully more runway to safely take off and land than they would at sea level. That's exactly why Kamdo Bamda Airport in Tibet, sitting at over 4,300 meters, has one of the longest runways on Earth, stretching more than 5,000 meters, largely just to compensate for the thin air. The runway itself is built in careful layers, stabilized ground, then a subbase, then crushed stone, then the final pavement, with each layer independently tested for density and strength before the next goes on. Drainage channels run along the edges because on a mountain, water isn't a minor inconvenience. Heavy rain or fast-melting snow that isn't cleared quickly can weaken pavement or freeze into black ice on a runway aircraft are landing on at speed. When the mountain is the approach. Some mountain airports don't just deal with altitude, they deal with genuinely dangerous approaches. Paro Airport in Bhutan sits in a valley surrounded by peaks up to 5,500 meters, and the approach requires pilots to make a steep, manual, visually guided descent between mountainsides, weaving around terrain that a fully automated landing system simply can't handle. Fewer than a few dozen pilots in the world are certified to fly it. Lukla's Tenzing Hillary Airport in Nepal, the main gateway for Everest trekkers, goes even further. A runway roughly 500 meters long, angled uphill at nearly 12 degrees, ending in a mountain wall on one side and a steep drop on the other, with essentially zero margin for a rejected landing. These aren't hypothetical engineering exercises. They're airports that operate every single day, moving real passengers through some of the most demanding flying conditions on the planet. Getting supplies to the summit. None of this works if nothing can actually reach the site. Building a mountaintop airport usually means building an entire secondary infrastructure project first. Winding access roads, tunnels through rock shoulders, bridges across ravines, avalanche barriers, and drainage systems engineered to stay usable in rain, fog, ice, and snow. Because fuel trucks and emergency vehicles still need to reach the summit on the worst weather days, not just the good ones. In practice, building an airport up there means re-engineering the entire mountain around it, from base to peak. Why anyone bothers? For isolated mountain communities, a runway like this can shrink a multi-day journey down to an hour, connecting people to hospitals, supplies, and emergency response that would otherwise be impossible to reach quickly. It can turn a remote valley into a tourism destination overnight. And, in disaster-prone regions, it can be the difference between a rescue operation that arrives in hours versus one that arrives too late. But it comes with responsibility that flatland airports don't carry in the same way. These are living landscapes with their own water systems, wildlife, and natural hazards, not empty real estate waiting to be paved. The engineering only counts as a success if it respects that. When the first aircraft finally touches down on a runway carved into a summit, it's not just a routine landing. It's confirmation that years of blasting, retaining walls, drainage systems, and precision paving actually held against a mountain that never wanted to be flat in the first place. Would you fly into one of these? Let me know which one scares you more. Paro's turn between the peaks, or Lukla's uphill runway with a wall at the end.